If you're expecting The Wicked Witch of the West, or Anya Taylor-Joy, or even Fairuza Balk and the Girls, you're about to be sorely disappointed. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Horror Movie Syllabus. My name is Professor Victor, and I'll be your host as we go through all of the essential, noteworthy, interesting, and notorious modern horror films. If you're new to the channel, I recommend you check out the introduction video. There's a link to that in the description below. And it'll give you a pretty good idea of what we usually do at the Horror Movie Syllabus, which is to look at a particular subgenre of horror and then explore 3 movies from that subgenre. But today we're doing our Is It Syllabus-Worthy series, where I take a look at a particular movie that was recommended by you guys in the comments below, and then I check it out for the first time. I do a little review, letting you know what I liked about it, what I didn't like about it, and then I let you know whether or not I think it's good enough to go on the Horror Movie Syllabus. Today's recommendation came from Casbo Haribo, and I don't know for sure that I'm pronouncing that correctly, and if I'm not, my apologies. The name does make me want gummy bears. I'm just going to put that out there. I'm craving gummy bears right now. Casbo went ahead and recommended The Witch Part 1, The Subversion. And they recommended this on our Korean video, which tells me that it's a Korean film. And I love Korean horror. I have not been disappointed with the Korean horror that I've seen so far. If you've seen the video on Korean horror that we did, it's it tells you how good the movies are coming out of South Korea for horror, and it's just astounding the level of quality that's coming out. And I had not seen this movie, of course, and I didn't know what to expect other than I had high expectations because of it being a South Korean horror movie. Now, the title of the movie was a bit misleading. I was expecting something a little bit more traditional in the witch vein. I had a certain expectation. I expected there to be a witch in a movie called The Witch. But we're going to get into all of that in just a second because my expectations were off, to say the least. This movie was not at all what I expected, which is kind of par for the course when it comes to South Korean horror movies, but that is not necessarily a bad thing. Let's go ahead and get to the review right now. The recommended movie that we're looking at today is The Witch Part 1, The Subversion. The Witch Part 1, The Subversion came out in 2018 and is a very wordy title. That is a very long mouthful to say. And the title, like I indicated earlier, is misleading. It is not really going to give you what you think you're going to get from that title, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. This movie is from South Korea and is doing what South Korean horror movies tend to do, which is blend genres seamlessly to make something that feels very fresh and original. And this is one of those movies that maybe is not as fresh and original as some of the ones we talked about when we talked about Korean horror films, but it is something that feels definitely energetic and fresh and fun. But we're going to get into all that in just a minute. If you haven't seen it before, the movie is about a young girl who escapes from a laboratory and is being pursued by people with guns. She winds up falling into the care of a farmer and his wife and gets raised by them as their own daughter, but she has certain powers that she doesn't really understand or know the origin of. And when she uses them on a national TV singing competition, she reveals herself to her former captors who decide to go out and try to pursue her yet again. And of course, hijinks abound as they tend to do. The movie is absolutely fantastic. It really is a standard kind of revenge flick slash action movie that just feels so energetic and fun, yet also dramatic and also funny and also scary. It's decidedly South Korean. It is exactly what I was talking about and how it blends all of these genres into something that feels distinct and, Korean. It really has that Korean feel to it. We've discussed this before, the blending of genres in Korean horror, and this is, just another example of it. And it's a really particularly good one because it's doing so many different kinds. In fact, I'm calling this a horror movie, but it probably is more honestly like an action slash sci-fi movie with some horror elements and some drama elements and some comedy elements. But it's really blending everything together like they tend to do, and it works extremely well. Even though it is primarily an action movie, all the different genres, all the different blends do get their due. The movie never gives short shrift to anything, which is a challenge because the movie is chock full of plot. It's got a lot of plot and it's got a lot of things to cover, and it does so very well. We'll get into that a little more in a minute, but it does so really, really well. It never feels like the comedy or the horror or the drama or the science fiction ever gets short shrift or gets forgotten about or dropped. It all still winds up being along for the ride, even though the movie's action ratchets up and ratchets up and ratchets up. And it never loses sight of all these other elements that it wants to incorporate into the movie. It's done really well. It's a nice balance, and I couldn't be more pleased with how well this movie juggled all of these different tones. It works to make a really wonderfully complex and engaging movie that I could not take my eyes off of. Another thing that made it hard to take my eyes off it was how well made it is. It's a wonderfully shot film with really cool locations that sometimes feel distinctly South Korean and other times feel universal. Like so when the story called for something that felt a little bit more specific to the country, it had it. And when it wanted it to be a little bit more universally accessible, it had that too. Nice blend, just a really great camera work in this movie, really kinetic action scenes that just really grabbed you and drew you in, but also really wonderfully slowing down for the dramatic moments and letting the performances of the actors just kind of do their thing, just kind of resonate. The actors across the board are really, really great, especially Kim Da-mi, who plays the lead character, the young girl, and she is absolutely fantastic. She's got great screen presence, and apparently she's fairly new to the acting game. When I looked her up, there wasn't a whole lot on her resume, and so she's kind of new, kind of young, but she really nails it here, and she carries this movie, which is no small feat because there is a lot of stuff going on, and that's something I alluded to a little while ago. Is that the movie is chock full of plot. There's just so many things going on. There's a lot of story threads to follow in this movie, and amazingly, none of them get lost. None of them get left behind. None of them get dropped. It's a hard thing to manage to pull this off, to put so many story elements into a movie and still manage to sew everything up by the end of the movie. It's a real challenge, and it's interesting because it could be a little hard to keep track of everything that's going on, all the characters. There are multiple people out to get this girl throughout the movie, and yet I never felt confused. I never was unable to follow it. They keep it simple enough that I never got lost in the story. And this story goes into some really odd places too. Like they introduce this element of this American Idol-esque singing competition as a way for our lead character to make some money for her family with their struggling farm and her mother who has some medical issues. Again, lots of story points, right? And yet these bizarre things going in there. This wacky best friend character whose dad happens to be a cop. All this stuff's going in there, and it all somehow works. It all feels organic and explainable and inevitable almost. It makes sense in the movie, even though if I just tell you all of these elements, it really will feel like too much. It'll feel or sound like it's a mess of a movie, but it's not. It's not a mess of the movie at all. You've got all these different villains with different agendas going on, trying to chase this girl who's just trying to live her life basically, and yet you're able to follow all of this without a roadmap, if you will. And then the movie still has some time to throw you some curveballs and give you some surprises and plot twists. It's amazing. It really is an impressive feat to have this movie cram so much into a movie that is basically 2 hours long. It's a 2 hour movie. This sounds like a movie that should have been 3 hours long and with so much plot, but it's not. It's 2 hours long and it doesn't need to be longer. It really did its job in the time it gave it. It didn't waste time. It moved the story along. Really wonderfully paced movie. And it didn't drop anything. It just juggled all these balls up in the air without dropping a single one of them. And it's one of the things I liked the most about this movie. I really liked this movie quite a bit. There's basically very few complaints. Like I said, it's thick plot, but it never was a problem for it to be a thick plot. It's got multiple genres going on, multiple tones going on, and it weaves through all of them expertly. It's got great performances across the board. The action in this movie is a tremendous amount of fun. It's some of it's kind of like surreal looking action. It's kind of done with some special effects, and it's just a blast. The movie is a tremendous amount of fun and action, and it's exciting, but it also has heart and drama, and it's really funny at certain points too. Basically, whatever you're looking for, it's going to give it to you, unless what you're looking for is like a supernatural style witch, the witch that you normally think of. This movie has nothing to do with that. It really is more about like, it's got, things about powers and stuff in there, but it really is more kind of scientific based. And the stereotypical witch with the pointy hat and the broomstick and all that and magic and things like that, that's not here. They actually explain in the movie why it's called The Witch, and it makes sense in the context of the movie. But when you see that as the title of the movie, you're expecting something that you're not getting here, but you won't care. I went into this movie expecting a witch movie. I was expecting something supernatural, some sort of, South Korean folklore type tale. Didn't get that at all. Right off the bat, it was very clear that's not what this movie was going to be. And within 5 minutes, I did not care. I did not care that I didn't get a witch movie, even though that's what I was kind of mentally prepared for, because what it did give me instead was so great. It was so much fun. But was it fun enough and great enough to make its way onto the syllabus? Let's find out. So, as always, it's time for the question. Is it syllabus worthy? And the answer is probably. It probably is going to get onto the syllabus because it's just absolutely a fun ride that I thoroughly enjoyed. And maybe part of my effusiveness comes from the fact that it was not what I was expecting, but it delivered so much for me that I just felt incredibly satisfied watching it. But I had a great time with this movie. And it's the kind of movie that is under the radar enough that I feel like it would warrant getting on the syllabus to kind of spread the word and get people to check it out. The one hesitation I have, and why I say probably instead of certainly, is that it is light on the horror. It has some horrific elements and stuff like that. It has some gruesome gore and things, but it really is more of an action movie, sci-fi movie. And so putting it on the horror movie syllabus when it's, yeah, I tend to do this. I tend to like maybe bump into extra credit when it's not super solidly horror, but I'd really want to put this movie on the syllabus proper because it's just that good. Now, the caveat is that I probably wouldn't want to put it in the Korean subgenre, which is where Casbo suggested it go. And I can see the suggestion of obviously it's a South Korean horror movie. Korean subgenre makes sense. I probably wouldn't put it there solely because the movies that are in the South Korean horror subgenre are just so good. They're just so good. And is this movie comparable to that? Yeah. Does it hold its own against those movies? Yeah, in my opinion, for sure. But I wouldn't want to bump into them. I wouldn't want to have to kill my darling, so to speak. I don't want to do the Sophie's choice. So where I would probably want to put it is horror action. This movie solidly fits into the horror action subgenre for me. This is a great choice for horror action. And had I seen this before I did the syllabus, probably would have had to try to figure out a way to put it there because it just fits so well. And this movie's so good because it's an action movie. It's a horror action movie, but it's so much more than that. It's got such really solid drama, really funny comedy, really great action scenes, really cool sci-fi concepts, really creepy stuff, gory stuff. It's got so much going on and it just deserves to be seen and talked about. So horror action probably is the way to go, unless there was like a subgenre for like superpowers, which there may well be in the very near future. Stay tuned for that. But I definitely want to see this movie get more love. I want to see people check it out more. And there is, as the name would denote, a part two. And I think it's just called part two, the other one, which is kind of hysterical. And the movie does kind of end on a little bit of a cliffhanger. I have not watched the sequel yet, but I'm gonna. I'm definitely going to check out the sequel. And I brace myself because I'm pretty sure that, sequels tend to not be as good as the original. But and then now I kind of have to expect to, so the surprise factor is gone a little bit, but I still can't help it. I got to check out the sequel at some point because the first one is so good. It's definitely worth your time. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend checking it out. Obviously, I'm very excited about it. It's definitely worth your time. If you like, action movies, if you like, Korean movies, this one is definitely a fun ride. I want to thank Casbo Herbo for recommending this because this was a slam dunk of a recommendation. I was very pleasantly surprised and very satisfied after watching this movie. It was a great experience, and I can't thank you enough for recommending it and getting it on my radar so I can get on everybody else's radar that's watching today. But now on my radar is going to be a horror trivia pursuit card question, because it's that time of the video where I need to check out a horror trivia pursuit card and try to answer the question on camera. Now, we're looking at a South Korean horror movie, so it only makes sense to do the international category on the card. And the question is, in 2008's Martyrs, what is the title of the leader of the sinister organization? And you're in my wheelhouse today, Trivial Pursuit, because Martyrs is a favorite of mine. In fact, when people ask, like, what's my favorite modern horror movie, like in the last, say, 20 years, Martyrs is usually my go-to because it's just got so much going on for it. It's from part of the new French Extremity. We talked about it in that video, and it's it's a brutal film. It's got a lot of rough stuff going on. I recommend checking out the video. You can hear my thoughts on it a little bit more completely. But the movie is very brutal, very violent, but also very deep and existential. At least that's the way I feel about it. It has something interesting to say, and it goes places you don't expect it to go to. And there is this sinister organization in there, and that's what the card's asking about. Is there's a leader of the organization, and what is her it says what is her title, and that's the interesting thing, because I'm not sure they ever give her name, because that's when I first read the card. I thought, oh, it's going to be asking for her name, and I don't if they give her name, I don't remember or know what it is, but I'm pretty sure I know what they mean when they say title. Now, it's worth noting that Martyrs is a French film, and this is kind of a clue for those of you that are trying to figure out the answer to this question right now. It's a French film, so that might be a bit of a clue as to what I think the title is. I'm like 95% sure that I know the answer to this question, because again, I've seen this movie. Well, I actually haven't seen it that many times because it's a tough watch. It's hard to watch it over and over again, so I haven't seen it as many times as maybe I would like to. But it sinks into my brain, man. I remember it pretty well. So I think I've got my answer locked in. Time for you to lock your answer in. What is the title? Think French. And ready? Let's go ahead and give me my answer. Or give you my answer. My answer, of course, is Mademoiselle. I remember them calling her Mademoiselle throughout the movie, which is just the French for like ma'am or miss. So I'm pretty sure that that's what the card's asking for. I don't think there is an actual official title like like general or something like that, or president. I think it's just Mademoiselle, because I think that's all they ever call her in the movie, if I recall correctly. So let's check the card and see if the card agrees with me. Mademoiselle. Mademoiselle, I was on this one, and I felt confident because it's Martyrs, and Martyrs is, like I said, it's somewhat of a favorite of mine. If you haven't seen that movie, maybe watch the video for our new French Extremity before you check out the movie, because it's got a lot going on, and it ain't for everybody. It's a rough one, so be mindful of that. But I just want to say thanks to everybody who stuck it out long enough. Let me know if you had some funny answers to the question, as always, because I like to hear those. And come back next week. We'll be doing something completely different. But until then, class dismissed.